My daughter-in-law kicked me out of my son's life, so I married her widowed father and became her stepmother. If you're just tuning in, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. And please show us some love with a like. And comment below to let us know where you're tuning in from. The rain hammered against the kitchen window as she clutched the phone, her knuckles white with disbelief. 27 years of raising Michael, of scraped knees and midnight fevers, of sacrificing her own dreams so he could chase his. And this was how it ended. You heard what I said, Denise. Michael's voice cut through the static, cold as winter steel. Rebecca doesn't want you around anymore. She says you're interfering. Denise Washington felt her world tilt sideways. Interfering? She'd simply suggested that maybe, just maybe, putting their 3-month-old daughter in daycare wasn't the best idea when Rebecca's own mother had offered to help. One conversation. One gentle suggestion. Baby, you can't be serious, she whispered, her throat constricting. I'm your mother. And Rebecca is my wife. My choice is made. The line went dead. Denise stared at the phone screen, Michael's contact photo. His graduation day, her arm around his shoulders, both of them beaming, now felt like mockery. Her legs gave out and she collapsed into the kitchen chair where she'd fed him breakfast every morning for 18 years. The house suddenly felt cavernous, echoing with memories of a son who'd just erased her from his life with surgical precision. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky like God himself was laughing at her pain. She'd lost everything. Her marriage had crumbled 3 years ago when Robert died in that car accident. Now Michael, her reason for breathing, her greatest achievement, had chosen his wife's comfort over his mother's heart. But Denise Washington wasn't the type to go quietly into the night. As lightning illuminated her tear-streaked face, something darker than grief began to take root in her chest. Something that whispered of justice, of consequences, of making people understand exactly what they'd thrown away. 6 months of silence stretched between Denise and her son like a chasm filled with bitter resentment. She tried everything. Flowers, cards, showing up at their house only to have Rebecca slam the door in her face while Michael stood behind her like a shadow of the man she'd raised. The isolation was suffocating. Her sister Beverly had moved to Atlanta, her few friends seemed uncomfortable around her grief, and the house felt like a mausoleum dedicated to a love that had been murdered in cold blood. It was during one of her sleepless nights, scrolling through social media like a digital masochist, that she found him. Gerald Patterson, Rebecca's father. The man was devastatingly handsome for 52, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that held the weight of recent loss. His wife had died 8 months ago. Cancer. The posts on his timeline painted a picture of devastating grief. A man who'd loved deeply and was now drowning in the silence of an empty house. Denise studied his photos with the intensity of a detective. There he was at family barbecues, his arm around Rebecca, pride radiating from every pore. Here he was with his late wife, their love story splashed across decades of anniversaries and vacations. But it was the recent posts that made her pulse quicken. Gerald was broken, raw, vulnerable, perfect. She clicked on his profile again, memorizing details. He worked in construction, owned his own company. A man's man who probably fixed things with his hands and believed in old-fashioned values like loyalty and respect. The kind of man who'd raised a daughter who thought she could destroy families without consequences. As dawn crept through her blinds, an idea began to form. Twisted, beautiful, and absolutely brilliant in its simplicity. If Rebecca wanted to play games with family dynamics, then Denise would teach her exactly how dangerous that game could be. The coffee shop was crowded, the morning rush creating perfect cover for what needed to look like fate. Denise had been tracking Gerald's routines for 2 weeks. Not stalking, she told herself, just researching. Every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:15 a.m. sharp, he ordered a large black coffee and a blueberry muffin at Java Junction on 5th Street. She timed her entrance perfectly, fumbling with her purse as she rushed through the door, creating just enough chaos to guarantee a collision. Hot coffee splashed across his shirt as they tangled together, her rehearsed apology tumbling from her lips. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let me help you." Gerald Patterson was even more striking up close. Despite the coffee stains spreading across his white button-down, he was chuckling, hands raised in a gesture of good-natured surrender. "It's all right, really. No harm done." But Denise was already dabbing at his shirt with napkins, playing the part of the flustered woman perfectly. I'm such a klutz in the mornings. Please, let me pay for your dry cleaning. Or buy you another coffee. Something. You don't have to. I insist. She looked up at him through her lashes, the move calculated but not obvious. I'm Denise, by the way. And I really am mortified. Gerald. His handshake was firm, calloused from years of honest work. And honestly, you're doing me a favor. I was running late anyway, and now I have an excuse. She laughed, the sound genuine despite the manipulation behind it. Well, when you put it like that, can I at least buy you that replacement coffee? As they waited in line together, Denise let herself study him properly. There was sadness in his eyes, yes, but also strength. This was a man who endured, who carried his burdens without complaint. The kind of man who deserved better than a daughter who'd learned cruelty from somewhere. You know, Gerald said as they settled into a corner booth, I haven't had an adventure like this in months. My life's been pretty predictable lately. Denise's heart hammered against her ribs. Well then, here's to a little chaos. What started as calculated revenge slowly transformed into something Denise hadn't expected. Genuine connection. Gerald was everything her late husband Robert had never been. Attentive, emotionally available, present in conversations instead of hiding behind newspapers and television screens. Their coffee meetings became dinner dates. Dinner dates became weekend adventures. Gerald showed her parts of the city she'd never explored, introduced her to hole-in-the-wall restaurants where the owners knew his name and asked about his late wife with gentle concern. She would have liked you, he said one evening as they walked along the riverfront, city lights dancing on the water's surface. Marie always said I needed someone who could challenge me. Denise felt a stab of guilt so sharp it nearly stopped her breathing. She was deceiving this good man, using his grief as a weapon against his own daughter. But when he took her hand, his thumb tracing circles across her knuckles, the guilt dissolved into something warmer and infinitely more dangerous. She was falling for him. Actually, genuinely falling for Gerald Patterson. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd set out to destroy Rebecca's peace of mind and instead found herself healing from wounds she'd carried for decades. Gerald listened when she talked about Michael, about the pain of being cut off from her grandchild, about the loneliness that had been eating her alive. Family's supposed to be forever, he said, anger flashing in his eyes. What kind of person keeps a grandmother from her grandchild? Denise felt a flutter of satisfaction. Gerald was already on her side without even knowing the war had begun. It was during their 6th week of dating that Gerald mentioned Sunday dinner. Rebecca's been asking about you, he said, his voice carefully neutral. She's curious about who I've been spending my time with. Perfect. Denise smiled, her pulse quickening with anticipation. I'd love to meet your family. The trap was set. Soon, Rebecca Patterson would discover exactly who had captured her father's heart, and learn that some wars have consequences no one sees coming. Sunday dinner at the Patterson house was an exercise in barely controlled chaos. Rebecca bustled around the kitchen, baby Amara on her hip, trying to impress the mysterious woman who'd captured her father's attention. The smell of fried chicken and collard greens filled the air, creating an atmosphere of warmth that made Denise's chest tight with memory. She'll be here any minute, Gerald called from the living room, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. The man was nervous, clearly desperate for his daughter's approval of his new relationship. I just want everything to be perfect, Daddy, Rebecca replied, bouncing the baby gently. It's been so long since you've been happy. Michael emerged from the bathroom, straightening his shirt. He'd filled out in the months since Denise had seen him, his face harder somehow, but still recognizably her son. The son who'd chosen loyalty to his wife over love for his mother. The doorbell rang. Gerald's face lit up as he hurried to answer it, his footsteps echoing through the hardwood foyer. Denise heard his voice, warm with affection. Right on time. Come in, sweetheart. Rebecca smoothed her dress, plastered on her hostess smile, and turned toward the hallway. Daddy, bring her in. I can't wait to. The words died in her throat. Denise stepped into the kitchen like an avenging angel, her arm linked through Gerald's, wearing the red dress he'd complimented at their last dinner. Her smile was serene, victorious, and absolutely terrifying in its calm perfection. Rebecca, she said sweetly, what a lovely home you have. The room fell into the kind of silence that precedes earthquakes. Michael's face went ashen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Baby Amara, sensing the tension, began to fuss. What? How? Rebecca stammered, her grip tightening on her daughter until the baby's cries escalated. Gerald looked between them, confusion creasing his brow. Do you all know each other? Oh yes, Denise said, her voice dripping with false warmth. Rebecca is my daughter-in-law. Or should I say was my daughter-in-law, since she decided I wasn't family anymore. The bomb had been dropped. Now came the beautiful, terrible fallout. The kitchen erupted into chaos like a grenade had detonated in the center of the family gathering. Baby Amara's cries pierced the air as Rebecca stumbled backward, her face cycling through shock, rage, and something that looked dangerously close to panic. You've got to be kidding me, Michael snarled, finding his voice first. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, the careful composure he'd maintained for months cracking like ice under pressure. Mom, what the hell is this? Gerald's confusion was palpable, his head swiveling between his daughter and the woman he'd been falling in love with. Denise? You're Michael's mother? The one who what? Denise interrupted smoothly, her smile never wavering. The one who loved her son unconditionally? The one who sacrificed everything to raise him? Or the one your daughter decided was too much trouble to keep around? Rebecca finally found her voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. Daddy, she's been using you. Can't you see that? This is all some sick game to get back at us. Is it? Gerald's voice was deadly quiet, his eyes fixed on Denise with an intensity that made her stomach flutter with both fear and excitement. Denise, tell me she's wrong. Tell me the last 2 months meant something. The room held its breath. This was the moment of truth, the crossroads where Denise would either reveal herself as the manipulator she'd started as, or double down on the feelings that had surprised her with their authenticity. They meant everything, she said, stepping closer to Gerald, her hand finding his chest. What started as curiosity became real, Gerald. You have to believe that. Curiosity. Rebecca's voice rose to a shriek. You mean revenge? You targeted my father because you're bitter and pathetic and couldn't handle being cut off from a family that didn't want you anymore. The words hit like physical blows, but Denise absorbed them with the grace of someone who'd been preparing for this battle for months. The family that didn't want me, she repeated slowly, is about to become my family in a very different way. She turned to Gerald, her eyes bright with tears that were only partly manufactured. I love you, Gerald Patterson, and I want to marry you. The silence that followed Denise's declaration stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Gerald's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, betrayal, confusion, and underneath it all, something that looked heartbreakingly like hope. Mary, he whispered, his voice cracking on the word. Michael exploded first. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Both of you. This is insane. But Denise only had eyes for Gerald, her hands framing his face with a tenderness that was startlingly real. I know how it looks. I know it started wrong. But Gerald, what we have, it's the most honest thing I've felt in years. Honest. Rebecca's laugh was bitter, hysterical. You call stalking my father and manipulating his grief honest? I call finding love in unexpected places honest. Denise shot back, never breaking eye contact with Gerald. Your father was drowning in loneliness just like I was. We saved each other. Gerald's hands came up to cover hers, his calloused fingers trembling. Is that true? Did you really plan this? The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Denise could see the war in his eyes. The love he'd thought was real battling against the betrayal of learning its origins. She made her choice, the words tumbling out with desperate sincerity. I planned to meet you, yes, but I never planned to fall in love with you. I never planned to find someone who made me remember what it felt like to be cherished. Gerald, you brought me back to life. This is sick, Michael spat, his face flushed with rage. Mom, you can't seriously think. What I think, Gerald interrupted, his voice gaining strength, is that your mother was grieving the loss of her family and you left her with nothing. Maybe she did target me initially, but that doesn't make what we found together a lie. Rebecca's mouth fell open. Daddy, you can't be considering this. Gerald's eyes never left Denise's face. Marie always said that love finds a way, even in the darkest places. Maybe especially in the darkest places. He took a shuddering breath. Yes, Denise, I'll marry you. The room exploded again, but this time Denise was ready for the storm. The engagement announcement hit the community like a social media wildfire, spreading through church groups, neighborhood associations, and family networks with the speed of scandal. Denise savored every shocked phone call, every horrified text message, every whispered conversation that died when she entered a room. Gerald had given her a ring, his grandmother's emerald-cut diamond, a family heirloom that made Rebecca's face go pale when she saw it. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Denise wasn't just marrying into the Patterson family, she was claiming her place in its history. 6 weeks, Gerald said over breakfast, his hand covering hers across the kitchen table. I don't want to wait any longer than that. Denise's pulse quickened. 6 weeks to become Rebecca's stepmother. 6 weeks to turn the power dynamic on its head so completely that her former daughter-in-law would spend the rest of her life watching her words around the woman she'd tried to erase. The wedding planning became a battlefield of passive aggression. Rebecca made token attempts to be supportive. After all, she couldn't openly oppose her father's happiness without looking heartless. But every interaction was loaded with barbed comments and thinly veiled hostility. Small ceremony, I assume? Rebecca said during one particularly tense planning session, bouncing baby Amara on her knee. Given the circumstances. Actually, Denise replied sweetly, flipping through bridal magazines with deliberate slowness, your father wants something special. Something that celebrates new beginnings. What Gerald wanted was a celebration that honored his late wife's memory while embracing his future. What Denise wanted was a spectacle that would cement her victory in front of everyone who'd ever doubted her strength. Michael hadn't spoken to either of them since the engagement announcement. He communicated through Rebecca, treating his mother like a stranger who'd infiltrated his family through deception and manipulation. The irony was delicious. For 27 years, Michael had been her whole world. Now he was discovering what it felt like to be shut out, to have your love rejected, to watch someone else take your place in the family hierarchy. Have you chosen your maid of honor yet? Gerald asked innocently. Denise smiled, imagining Rebecca's face when she made her request. Actually, I was hoping to ask Rebecca. After all, we're going to be family. The request hit Rebecca like a slap wrapped in silk ribbon. She stared at Denise across the bridal shop, surrounded by white dresses and the suffocating scent of gardenias, her face cycling through disbelief and barely contained rage. You want me to be your maid of honor? Her voice was carefully controlled, but Denise could see the tremor in her hands as she gripped baby Amara's stroller. It would mean so much to your father, Denise said, examining her manicure with studied casualness. And to me, of course. A gesture of family unity. The trap was perfect in its cruelty. If Rebecca refused, she'd look petty and vindictive. A daughter who couldn't put aside her own feelings for her father's happiness. If she agreed, she'd be forced to smile and celebrate while the woman she tried to destroy claimed victory in the most public way possible. Gerald beamed from his chair in the corner, oblivious to the psychological warfare playing out in front of him. That's a beautiful idea, sweetheart. Rebecca, wouldn't that be wonderful? Rebecca's smile was so forced it looked painful. Of course, Daddy. I'd be honored. The word came out like she was choking on broken glass. The next few weeks were an exercise in refined torture. Dress fittings where Rebecca had to stand still while Denise made decisions about color and style. Menu tastings where she had to nod and smile while her father's fiancé planned a reception that would celebrate the destruction of the family dynamic she'd worked so hard to control. The breaking point came during the bachelorette party planning. Denise had insisted on something elegant. Dinner at the city's most exclusive restaurant followed by wine tasting at a private vineyard. The kind of sophisticated affair that would be photographed and posted, ensuring that everyone would see Rebecca playing the dutiful daughter while her former mother-in-law claimed her throne. I can't do this anymore, Rebecca whispered to Michael after another planning session. They were in their bedroom, Amara finally asleep, the weight of the situation crushing down on them both. Then don't, Michael replied, his voice hollow. Let them have their twisted fairy tale. We'll go low contact after the wedding. But Rebecca knew better. There would be no going low contact with Denise Washington, soon-to-be Patterson. This wedding wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a lifetime of power plays and psychological games. She's going to be our daughter's step-grandmother, Rebecca said, the reality hitting her like ice water. She's going to be at every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering for the rest of our lives. The war wasn't ending with the wedding. It was just beginning. The bachelor party was Gerald's idea. A simple evening with his old construction crew and a few family friends at Murphy's Tavern, the kind of working-class bar where men solved the world's problems over beer and complained about their wives with equal affection and exasperation. What Gerald didn't expect was for Michael to show up. His future stepson walked into the smoky bar like he was heading to his own execution, hands shoved deep in his pockets, jaw set with the kind of determination that reminded everyone present exactly whose son he was. The conversations died as he approached Gerald's table, 30-odd years of family dynamics crackling in the space between them. "We need to talk," Michael said, his voice cutting through the jukebox music and ambient chatter. Gerald's friends suddenly found their beer bottles fascinating, creating a bubble of privacy around the two men. Gerald gestured to an empty chair, but Michael remained standing, towering over the table like judgment itself. "Your mother loves you," Gerald said quietly before Michael could speak. "More than life itself. I've never seen someone carry that kind of pain." "My mother is using you," Michael shot back, his composure cracking. "This whole thing is revenge and you're too blinded by loneliness to see it." Gerald's face hardened. "Maybe it started that way. But love is love, son, regardless of how it begins. Your mother found me when I was drowning in grief and I found her when she was dying from loneliness. We saved each other. She manipulated you. She loved me." Gerald's fist hit the table, making beer bottles jump. The bar fell silent, every conversation stopping as the two men faced off. "She loved me when I couldn't remember what it felt like to be wanted. When I was just existing, going through the motions of living without Marie. Your mother brought me back to life." Michael's face was a mask of anguish. "And what about what she's doing to my family? To my wife? To my daughter? What about what your family did to her?" Gerald's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "You cut her out like she was cancer, boy. Threw away 27 years of love because your wife was uncomfortable. Now you want to talk about family?" The truth hung between them like a loaded gun. Michael's eyes filled with tears he refused to shed, his whole body trembling with the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. "After tomorrow," Gerald said softly, "I'll be your stepfather. That makes us family whether you like it or not." The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, autumn sunlight streaming through the church windows like a benediction from heaven itself. Denise stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite, adjusting the pearl necklace Gerald had given her. Another family heirloom, another symbol of her complete integration into the Patterson legacy. Her dress was elegant rather than flashy. Ivory silk that skimmed her curves, long sleeves that spoke to sophistication rather than youthful exuberance. At 51, she wasn't trying to be a blushing bride. She was claiming her place as a woman who'd survived loss and emerged victorious. "You look beautiful," Rebecca said from behind her, the words sincere despite everything. Her maid of honor dress was a deep burgundy that complemented her skin tone perfectly. Denise's choice, of course, but she hadn't chosen poorly. "Thank you," Denise replied, turning to face her former daughter-in-law. "For everything. I know this hasn't been easy." Rebecca's smile was complicated, layered with emotions that would take years to untangle. "Daddy's happy. That's what matters." But they both knew it was more complicated than that. In 20 minutes, the power dynamic that had defined their relationship would be permanently reversed. Rebecca would have to navigate family gatherings where Denise held the position of respect, would have to bite her tongue when disagreements arose, would have to remember that the woman she tried to erase was now the family matriarch. The church was packed. Gerald's construction crew, Denise's few remaining friends, neighbors and church members who'd come to witness what everyone was calling either the love story of the decade or the revenge plot of the century. Michael sat in the front row beside his wife, his face a careful mask of neutral politeness. When the music began and Denise walked down the aisle on her late brother's arm, she saw Gerald waiting at the altar in his navy blue suit, his face radiant with joy that couldn't be faked. Whatever else was true about their relationship, his love for her was real. The ceremony was beautiful, traditional, punctuated by moments of genuine emotion that surprised everyone present. When Gerald promised to love and cherish her for the rest of their days, his voice broke with sincerity. When Denise pledged to honor and support him, tears streamed down her cheeks. "You may kiss the bride," the pastor announced. As Gerald's lips met hers, Denise caught sight of Rebecca in her peripheral vision. Her new stepdaughter was crying, whether from joy, grief, or resignation, Denise couldn't tell. But it didn't matter. The war was over. Denise Washington had become Denise Patterson, and with that transformation she'd claimed the ultimate victory. The reception was held at the Riverside Country Club, an elegant venue that spoke to Gerald's success and Denise's refined taste. Round tables draped in cream linen filled the ballroom, centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath creating an atmosphere of understated luxury. Denise moved through the crowd like a queen holding court, accepting congratulations and well wishes with the grace of someone who'd waited her entire life for this moment. Gerald never left her side, his hand warm on the small of her back, introducing her to business associates and old friends as my beautiful wife. The moment she'd been waiting for came during the reception dinner, when Gerald tapped his knife against his champagne glass and stood to address the room. "Most of you know that I lost my Marie 8 months ago," he began, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "I thought that was the end of my story. I thought I'd used up all my chances at happiness." Denise felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "But love," Gerald continued, his eyes finding hers across the crowd, "love has a way of surprising you. It shows up in unexpected places, wearing unexpected faces, offering second chances when you thought you were all out of hope." He raised his glass toward the head table where Michael and Rebecca sat with carefully composed faces. "To family," Gerald said, his voice carrying new weight. "To forgiveness. To understanding that love isn't always convenient or comfortable, but it's always worth fighting for." The toast rippled through the room, guests raising their glasses with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Denise caught Michael's eye across the ballroom and saw something she hadn't expected. Not anger, not resentment, but a kind of weary acceptance that looked almost like respect. When the dancing began, Gerald swept her onto the floor for their first dance as husband and wife. The song was At Last by Etta James, his choice and perfect in its simple declaration of love finally found. "No regrets?" he whispered in her ear as they swayed together. Denise looked over his shoulder at their assembled families, Michael bouncing baby Amara on his knee while Rebecca watched with guarded eyes, Gerald's construction crew laughing over beer and wedding cake, the mixture of joy and complexity that defined every real family gathering. "None," she whispered back, and for the first time in months she meant it completely. 6 months into their marriage, Denise Patterson stood in her new kitchen. Gerald's kitchen really, but increasingly theirs, preparing Sunday dinner for a family gathering that would have been unimaginable a year ago. The house smelled of roast chicken and cornbread, sounds of laughter drifting from the living room where Gerald was teaching little Amara to walk. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been arguments, tense conversations, moments when the weight of their complicated history threatened to crush the fragile new dynamic they were building. But slowly, painfully, something resembling peace had emerged from the wreckage of their old relationships. Michael had been the first to extend an olive branch, arriving at their door 3 months after the wedding with baby Amara in his arms and an expression of grudging surrender. "She needs to know her step-grandmother," he'd said simply, and Denise had burst into tears at the gift of that acknowledgement. Rebecca had taken longer to come around, but motherhood had a way of softening even the hardest edges. When baby Amara had taken her first steps toward Denise's outstretched arms, something had shifted in Rebecca's eyes. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that love could be complicated and still be real. Now, as Denise watched her husband bounce their granddaughter on his knee while Michael and Rebecca set the dining room table, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: contentment. Not the fierce satisfaction of victory, but the quiet joy of belonging somewhere. "Dinner's ready," she called, wiping her hands on her apron. Gerald appeared in the doorway with Amara, his face bright with the particular happiness of a man surrounded by family. "Smells incredible, sweetheart." As they gathered around the table, 4 adults and a toddler who represented the future they were all building together, Denise realized that revenge had transformed into something infinitely more valuable. She'd set out to destroy Rebecca's peace of mind and instead had built something that resembled forgiveness. "Grace?" Gerald asked, extending his hands to form their family circle. Denise took his hand and Michael's, watching as Rebecca completed the circle with her own tentative grip. In the space between their joined hands she felt the weight of their shared history. The pain and anger, yes, but also the love that had survived every attempt to kill it. "Lord," Gerald began, "thank you for second chances, for unexpected blessings, and for the family that surrounds this table. Help us to remember that love is stronger than hurt, and forgiveness is stronger than pride. Amen, they said together, and Denise felt the words settle into her bones like a promise finally kept. Thanks for listening to the amazing story we put together for you. Was this story worth your time? Drop your thoughts in the comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next upload.